more good.
So we're back with part 2 of my conversation with Robbie
Drink
Gilligan
better.
from Derwent Distillery in Tasmania. And this time we have the opportunity to unpack not just the climate of Tasmania and how that impacts the way the style is emerging, but actually how through mentorship, through leadership, this third wave of Tasmanian distillers who have worked across multiple brands are really shaping the community and helping to understand and define what a modern community of whiskey drinkers might look like, keeping the connection between people at the heart of it. I really hope you enjoy this slice of a conversation. We do talk a little more about botrytis, but I think it's worthwhile unpacking what does it mean not to just be a whiskey maker, but to be a whiskey maker in a community of whiskey makers for a community of whiskey drinkers. So, part 2 of our episode with Robbie Gilligan now. There is something really, I think, unique about the Tasmanian whiskey culture, which is distinct to Australian whiskey culture. Sorry, mainlanders. But there is something distinct about Tasmanian whiskey culture, which is that it's going through probably its third evolution at this point, where a number of the bottles that are on my shelf are not bottles. They're not bottles that necessarily represent the beginning of the Tasmanian whiskey story. And, you know, I was speaking with Mark Teague, Whiskey is My Jam, a few weeks ago. And he's just, he is single-handedly, I think, the most influential ambassador for Tasmanian whiskey, but by pure power of his passion. But what is so interesting to me is that when I first started exploring and trying to understand what was happening in Tasmanian whiskey in particular, there were components that were, it was hard to find consistency, right? Because there was a lot of almost everything was single cask. Yep. And those single casks almost always followed a pattern. Obviously, the influence of fortified wine barrels, the influence of those cut down pieces, the influence of, the 7-day lark schedule, some beautiful spirits and some beautiful highlights. Sullivan's Cove, the first time that they took out World's Best. But then I've also had, whiskies from Tasmania that have felt previously a little rough, like full of potential, but not quite there, or where I've sometimes thought, I'm not sure exactly how these are being pieced together and what the end outcome is, right? And I don't mind being bold enough to sort of say that. What sticks out to me about this kind of third wave or third evolution is that, we've now got I'll call it multi-generational mentored distillers and producers like yourself. I think about like Chris Thompson at Lark also, has been through a number of different places. There are a number of different distillers who are Rob at Warbs Harbour. And interestingly, like for me, Derwent and Warbs Harbour, Hunter Island also, are really 3 of the Tasmanian whiskey brands that stand out to me as they're kind of this new way of, okay, we've learned the lay of the land. We really know our place now in terms of we know what the climate is giving us. We know how we can play with these barrels. And people are starting to make distinctive strides to develop unique expressions. For me, the botrytis cask and Derwent will always go together. I make a point of seeking out other botrytis casks because I have a baseline to compare it to that it's so challenging for other spirits to meet the mark. And so I'd be really interested in your take on it in terms of the style of whiskey that you're trying to produce and where you see yourself in that it's no longer emerging, it's established Tasmanian spirit scene.
Yeah, totally. Interesting you picked those two. Damien Mackey and Rob Pulmere. Damien Mackey I would class as one of my best pals and one of the first people that I made friends with in Tassie. I just everything that he does, he values the same things that I value, and getting to know Rob, so does he. So when I was at Lark, those same people bought over him, and so the brands were under the same kind of group, right? Over him having been up to that point, Casey Overeem and his daughter Jane. Jane and I were very passionate about keeping the family side of the Overeem and the quality side. It was always very about the quality and about how her dad made this, and it was a family thing, but it was like made to the best way possible. Every release was just as good as the other. In fact, if not better. And so Jane and I made it our thing while I was there. That was part of my role, we were over him, And I remember going to venues and trying to convince them that Tassie whiskey was a thing, whereas now Australian whiskey even is a thing. And now you've got like bays in every bottle shop dedicated to just Australian whiskey, but that wasn't there 15 years ago. Do you know what I mean? That wasn't a thing. And so for me, and my point there was that Rob came on board just as I was leaving, and he was the dedicated Overeem distiller. So he would show up at Casey's house in the shed, and he'd be doing all the distilling, and he'd be meticulously polishing and just treating it like his baby, and just doing everything that Casey would have done and trying to do it just as good, if not better, to justify that, this is an established brand that was one of the best, it was benchmark in my opinion, And so he was dedicated to try and maintain those standards, if not to the best of his abilities, and if not doing better. And so for him, I've always enjoyed hanging out with Rob and talking about whiskey, and that's what he's a very passionate guy, and so is Damien. The two of them are known for being good at what they do because they give a cost. Do you know what I mean? They actually care, and they don't see that they know it all. Do you know what I mean? The same way I don't either. Like, I was a student 16 years ago. I'm still a student to this day. You look at guys like Jim McEwen, right? And I was lucky enough that when he came to Tassie, I got to the one showing that he did, right? And one thing I took from him was that you could be in the industry for 60 years, mate, but if you're not willing to talk to someone who's in their first day or first week about something that you've maybe not ventured into, like small cask maturation, for example, or this type of barrel that I've never used before, or what's that grain you guys have grown here? And all right, I've never worked with that, and what kind of shit. He was very engaging with everyone that came, and it wasn't just like tokenistic conversation. He was like getting right in about it, and people like Charlie McLean as well, who when he came over here, he valued conversation and stuff that he wasn't aware of as well. That's why they're the best. That's why they are who they are. That's why we all look up to those guys, is because they're still willing to say that, okay, I don't know all, and what you told me has taught me something new, and they'll probably go and use that in amongst what they're doing, and that's what these guys do. And that's the thing. It's like people that want to get better, want to improve, want to, it's not good enough yet, I can still do better. I've got more in me, and that's to our benefit as drinkers, as consumers, as fans, as appreciators. Do you know what I mean? It's like, as long as people like that still existing, no matter where they are, whether it's Tassie, Australia, or Scotland, wherever, right? As long as they're existing, then there's a good future ahead for all of us. Because what we've got available to us now is based on what those guys did at the start, because they were figuring it out. They were experimenting. They were making the mistakes, right? Bill Lark will tell you not all his whiskies were great, right? Most of them are, right? But, he was learning as well. He got the first bloody commercial license for craft license, right, in Australia. Yeah. So he was figuring it out. Casey was figuring it out. But they set a pathway for all of us to then go, right, it's up to us now to take what you guys have learned and have been willing to share, thankfully, but with an ever-changing market, that it's the consumers that are buying it. It's not just the same 5,000 people buying whiskey in Tasmania that are only buying from 6 producers anymore, And this is where I came in. This is where I started really thinking about it, was that, each distillery that opens up, that's another new kid on the block. So there's a lot of, emphasis on them whiskey events. So people want to go and see what's new, who's new, what they got, what these got. And then as this massive growth spurt happened, suddenly you've just got half the room is just unknowns. And you're like, for whiskey fans and whiskey tries like myself, it's like, yes, here we go, and you will get a variety of, well, that's good. And it's like, what's that? You'll get that. And I've had some whiskies where I've been like, what the hell is that? Do you know what I mean? Like my Botrytis, for example, when I first started. And you'll find that, like the really good ones will aim to go, right, okay, here we go. I'm going to take what I've done now. I know I can do better. And here's my next one. And yeah. And hopefully you'll see that, you'll taste that, and eventually they'll become the ones that'll do well, because right now the market's all over the place, right? And what I learned, right, specifically was 10 years ago, my mum came out with my stepdad. And I credit those two as being two of the most influential people in getting me actually appreciating whiskey, not just drinking it for the sake of it, but actually getting into it and appreciating terroir and flavour profiles and cask types and spirit types. And I loved that, right? But when they came here, I'm in my man cave just now, right? So we were all in here and I had a bottle of Sully's and Lark and everyone else's, right? And I was so excited because I thought, yes, I'm going to show these two what we're all about here. And I remember pouring a bottle of one of I won't say who it was, I poured one of the whiskies and I was so excited for it. And I'll never forget, they literally lifted up their glass like this, right? Hang on, I've not got any whiskey left. I'm just going to pour one of these, right? And this was the reaction. And this should have been a whiskey that they would have been singing from the heavens, right? So I was really excited. So I poured out the whiskey and they go, oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, that's nice. And I was like, what? What do you mean that's nice? This is like a bloody beautiful whiskey, do you know what I mean? And just the lack of reaction that I got, I think, just was make me just go, what just happened there? Like, I'm surprised. Like, this just changed my life when I tasted this whiskey, these whiskies, you know. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I've put everything that I've got and not got into what I'm doing here. And it wasn't until after they left that I thought about it. And I realised that these guys have predominantly drank Scotch and Irish whiskies, right? And some Japanese as well. This is a new thing for them, right? This is how different what we've been doing, and say in the last 15 years, right? What we've been doing is so different to what the rest of the world has been doing. That's why we've been recognised for who we are, but that's not to everyone's palate. It's the same reason I don't like mushrooms. Do you like mushrooms?
Love mushrooms.
Right, so there you go. That mushroom, if we split it in half, give me one half, you give you half, we will give you two completely different reports on what it is that we've got in front of us. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I will be like, no, chuck that in the bin, mate. You'll be, oh yeah, I can do this and I can do it. It's so I learned to appreciate that, one, you can't make one thing that everyone likes. So if you're going to do a range of whiskies, make sure you're not just making more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to really think about what it is that you're trying to achieve. What do you want someone to be tasting, right? It's not got to be, Robbie's Whiskey 1, Robbie's Whiskey 2, which is like kind of like one, but 5% different. And but no.
Are you saying that making the same spirit and banging it into just a different cask isn't enough, Robbie?
No, but that in itself, no, not like that. No, I don't mean like that. No, like there will be. I think it's important, right? That I was going somewhere else with it, but just what you're saying there.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think barrel types and just understanding your environment alone, right? What you have, what is around you, what is surrounding your maturation, your facilities, your whole area. Understanding that will help create variety and you can use that to your advantage, right? Where I was going was basically whiskies. The spiel that we used to always talk about was that barrel types, right? Yeah, the barrel gives it 80% of the flavour. No, it doesn't. It gives it 70% of the flavour, and you'd have this argument of it's 10% of a difference. And then I started to think, wait a minute, no, you're both in the wrong argument here, right? If whiskey is getting flavoured by 80% of it by the barrel, you're not drinking whiskey, pal. Do you know what I mean? Why are you making your spirit with a specific type of sugar source from grain, right? The flavour of the spirit has to come from the raw ingredients that the spirit was made from. The same way that gin has to come from the flavour profile of the juniper berry, right? What you do beyond that is what's going to determine the difference between your juniper spirit and your juniper spirit. What's the difference between your barley spirit and your barley spirit? Or what's the difference between your marriage of barley and wheat and whatever? Do you know what I mean? You've got to appreciate that it's the spirit that should be doing the talking. Well, this is my opinion, by the way, just my opinion, right? The barrel's job, I see it, is being more symbiotic. The barrel's job is there to take out what's not needed, volatility, undesirables, that kind of thing, right?
It's a big filter.
And what's that?
It's a big filter.
big time, massively, but also to give what's needed as well, you know, in terms of colour, because, you know, flavour profiles.
Yeah.
But the barrel, understand what the barrel's actually doing. Do you know what I mean? It's literally layer upon layer of microscopic pores interacting with the environment. So in hotter areas, hotter climates and temp and pressure changes, as it's opening up, it's literally absorbing the spirit into it and evaporating volatility. And at the same time, when it's colder, it's making a vacuum and basically bringing through all the things that have been locked into the wood. And the more change and fluctuation in temperatures, I celebrate that now. I love that stuff, right? I love it. I love the fact that during winter, my whiskey is the polar opposite to what it is in the summer. Not just because one's hot and one's cold. It's not. I've learned that it's not. It's not. It's literally, if you look at Scotland, right? If you put a whiskey in a barrel at 63.5% alcohol, the general rule of thumb is that every year after that the whiskey or the spirit is in barrel. It's not whiskey, it's that way. It will reduce by 0.5%. So the longer it's in barrel, obviously the lower the alcohol content gets, and what comes out is the strength. That will be cask strength, right? In Australia, predominantly we're in a dry climate, so we find that that's increasing the alcohol. So when I looked at it from my distillery, I chose a barrel number 10 it was, and it was to celebrate something that you mentioned earlier on as well about the Tasmanian and Australian history of it, you know, like the kind of the origins of it. But this barrel, right, went in at 63.4, specifically this one was, right? And after the first winter, it went down to 61 point something. It went down. I was like, holy shit. And I went down that much. It went down by like 3% alcohol in half a year. And when it came out of the cask, it came out at 67. And I was like, whoa, that's unbelievable. That's phenomenal, actually. So I really, and we all talk about terroir and being by the ocean and the sea and all this stuff, right? And that's cool and it's real, it's true, but up to points, understanding what part of it is the relevant part of the story, right? It's not because you're next to the sea that the sea soaks the barrels and makes it taste like no. It's the fact that what I found is we have the jerry, right? So if you look at on my branding, right, we just rebranded, right, and on my crest. So this is based on the Glasgow coat of arms, which is where I'm from, right? But it's all Tasmanian, right? So you've got at the bottom here, I've changed it so it's the River Derwent. And then above that, you can see the mountain. It's Mount Dromedary. So it's got the two peaks right behind us. Literally right behind. It's my backdrop to the distillery. You look at my distillery, you'll see it. And then this here is the Jerry. So the Jerry being the fog that starts from the other mountain range that you can see directly from my distillery. And as it comes down, it depending on day, because it changes every day, the fog can be so thick it literally covers my distillery and you can't see it. And if we were saying, say if we were like 5 meters apart, we can't see each other. That's how thick it is. That's literally coming into my distillery. That's coming through my bond stores every day that it's here. That's changing a hot, dry climate to a wet, humid, colder climate. That's what's drawing out more alcohol than water. So that's the time where the alcohol content is actually decreasing in the barrel, like a Scottish kind of UK kind of style. And then in the summertime, when that's all burned off, or even just later on in the day, when the sun burns it all off, then it reverses itself. And when I was thinking about that and visualising that, I thought, that's cool, man. I love that's literally what I'm dealing with. And so just learning more about how I can make that work, for me, that's exciting. I don't know if you got that, if you can get that, but it's exciting stuff, you know.
The excitement comes through. I think we are in an interesting space in whiskey globally, where because of the expansion and the excitement and enthusiasm and interest in whiskies made in other parts of the world, the study of climate and its unique impact on whiskey making is all of a sudden starting to come to the forefront, because it's not just climate in the way that we have thought about temperature. Is it hot, cold? Is it wet, dry? But you know, as you're describing, Australia is generally, yes, drier, but when you have that big humidity shift because of the jerry coming in, as you say, that humidity shift is working daily, microscopically with the barrels, as is the temperature change. as is the barometric pressure changes that come through depending on whether or not you're susceptible to high or low pressure systems and how quickly they move through. And all of those components are influencing that barrel reaction, which I think is so, it's not something that we've previously thought about in whiskey anywhere near enough.
Yeah. And that's where I was kind of going with before, sorry, but like I said, I went on my tangent, sorry. I'll bring it back in again. When my mum and that came, right, and I was thinking about it, I thought, well, because that is their whole exposure to whiskey would be through commercial channels, whatever's available in the bottle shops or the offies, as we call it, the off-license site. The most of that would be from Scotland. Some of it would have been from Ireland and some would have been from Japan, right? But predominantly it would have been Scotch whiskey. So that's not who we are in Australia. That's not what we do. We are focusing on more of, which is great and which I love, which is why I love it, right? Is that we're not just relying on 93% of all our production to come from second fill bourbon casks or ex-bourbon casks and then flavor and then further enhanced with other types of barrels. It's not, we're not thinking along those lines. We've given ourselves less restrictions, rightfully so, where we can do experimentation. We can work with what's on our own doorstep. So if you're in Victoria, regional Victoria, you can use regional Victorian, other producers that are used barrels that you can use their products. So whether it be wineries or, you know, rum producers or whatever, right? And I love this, right? And so for me, I started thinking about it and I goes, right, okay, I was lucky, I was blessed that when I started, we were in that bubble where if, you know, Tash is coming over from New Zealand and she's a big whiskey fan, right? And she'll come to her 3 favourite distilleries, right? Newtown, Hunter Island and Wobbs and Derwent, right? And she'll buy 6 bottles from each of us, right? And she'll come out twice a year. Well, now Tash comes out once a year if she can, and Tash will maybe buy 1 bottle from each of those distilleries, but maybe she'll only buy 2. So one of us misses out. So we can't rely on Tash anymore and the other Tashes of the world, right? So it's like, it's a reality. That is literally where we're all at. And so for me, if you want to really grow a business, grow your own business, being from a small, you know, family, mum and dad business to a Lark or whatever else, you're not relying on the 5,000 people in Tassie buying whiskey anymore. You're not relying on the same groups of people all across Australia. You're looking beyond, you're looking exporting, right? That's where your majority of your spirit's going to be going to. So those people are coming from all over the world, from whether you go Europe, whether you go Asia, whether you go wherever, right? Most of them will experience Scotch whiskey. So for me, it was realising that, okay, well, if I'm wanting my business to grow and get beyond where I'm at just now, I need to look at these guys as being my core group of consumers. And if that's what they're subjected to, well, I need to create whiskey that's familiar, at least, or approachable to them. If I'm going to be doing something different, it needs to be something that's not necessarily a huge jump from one to the other. It's got to be something that they can get into and appreciate and go, oh, I see what you're doing. It's not my usual type, but I'm appreciating that you've got this in it, and I always like this in my whiskey, and you guys have kind of, do you know what I mean? So I really started looking at whiskey production as not just the barrel first fill. I started really appreciating second fills, to the point where recently I've been in third fills just as experimenting, just to see, you know, like I like that. Like I say, I'm always trying different things, and so second fill of the barrel for me is just as important as the first fill. And they're very different to each other. Do you know what I mean? They are. And I like that. I think the second fill, I always loved the fact that, you know, the mash bill that you chose for that specific whiskey really comes through. I did it briefly because I did it as the example with my mum and that. But this was just one of the whiskies that I did before that ties in with another thing that you said about the history and Damien Mackey. So these are the 3 things I wanted to eat, if that's okay.
Yeah.
If that's all right. Yeah. Cool. So while I was building the actual Derwent distillery, while I was creating the space, putting the equipment, setting it all up, right, I literally did it from scratch. So Emma and I, what would that be, 7 years ago, found our property after years of looking for what we were going to do in terms of like our permanent setup. And we basically decided that this was the place for us. It was on the Derwent River. It was in the Derwent Valley. I chose to call the distillery Derwent Distillery not because it's the same way as saying someone's Van Diemen's Land. So it's Van Diemen's this, Van Diemen's that, Derwent this, Derwent that. Derwent Distillery pre-existed long before anyone alive did. We always talk about the Scot, and this is something I'm so passionate about this, by the way, right? Hopefully that comes through, right? Scotland is its own region. Scotland is its own entity. Scotland is its own category, right? Japan, and all rightfully so, by the way, right? Japan has been it for over 100 years. They've got their own category. They've got their own identity. America, Ireland, fantastic, right? The rest of us are all, including New Zealand, we're all tucked into this new world category, right? Which is like, lots of Asia and parts of Europe and Australia and New Zealand, we're all in that, right? A lot of rubbish, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look
It's like saying Asian food.
Exactly, mate. Exactly, right? But here's the thing, right? So, legalised distilling, so actual commercial distilling, right? Started based on the 1823 Excise Act, right? That's when it all started for all those countries, right? And Governor Macquarie from Sydney in 5th of August, 1822, put it out to the rest of the country that as of that date, anyone that could satisfy the requirements of, stills of a certain size, because up to that point, they didn't exist, right? They were literally like hand beaten, whatever the community was using or whatever was being, it was like made by whoever could make it, and it was creating whatever could be created from it, right? There was no refinement. It was just literally making alcohol. Life is shit, so let's just drink it and forget about it, right? And enjoy it, right? Of course. But it was, it was unrefined. It wasn't made for quality. It was made by the poorer people, right? So if you were a farmer, you were blessed with an excess crop. You've got extra barley, you've got extra grain. You can use that to ferment it, make it into beer, and distill it into Whisky beer, right? Which was the Gaelic for whiskey, because that's what obviously where it comes from, right? And for me, it was always if you look at like Robbie Burns talks about, like the dress to the haggis. The rich people were eating watery soup and drinking wine. The poor people were eating haggis and drinking whiskey. And yeah, we look at what single malt whiskey has been the most premium spirit, one of the most premium spirits. Do you know what I mean? It was literally at that. It wasn't just Scotland or whatever, right? This is all the communities were doing it. Everyone was doing it, but no one was doing it at a commercial scale. So, for Macquarie put it out there that as of that date, if you could satisfy the requirements of building a still that would house 2,700 litres or above, making up the figures now, but it's roughly 100,000 gallons a year or something like it was, and you had to build a 10-foot wall surrounding your whole complex, just as some of the requirements, then you would qualify to apply for a license with a favourable rate of tax. And so the first distillery to actually be granted a distillery license under the Excise Act was Sorrel Distillery in Tassie, which was on the same strip road as Cascade Brewery. So it was actually Cascade Road. It doesn't. The site has been built on by houses since then, but it was there, and it lasted for 6.5 years. The second distillery to get a license was actually Derwent Distillery. That's why I picked it, right? Derwent Distillery was instrumental in this, right? Because for a whole number of reasons, and it includes not just Tasmania, right? For Australia, this was big, right? Derwent Distillery was just down the road. So Cascade Road, from Cascade Brewery, coming back into Hobart, it starts as Cascade Road, becomes South Hobart Road, and then becomes the start of Macquarie Street, which is one of the arterial roadways in Hobart. And Derwent Distillery was set up by a Corkman, right, from Ireland, from Middleton, right, Cork, just at the start of Macquarie Street, literally on the first street off of it called Gore Street, which literally runs alongside the Hobart rivulet. He came out, Richard Rowan Walpole and Lone, came out, set up as a brewery initially, way before Cascade, right? Didn't open it as a brewery, but when Governor Macquarie put this out to the whole of Australia, he saw the opportunity and went, do you know what, bugger it, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to convert it from what was going to be a brewery into a distillery, and got the equipment, did everything. It went, right, that's it. He got granted the second license in 3 months after the first one. So that was March 1823. And that same year, New South Wales put out their first distilleries as well, and Victoria as well. So all the first licenses ever given out were actually in Australia, not in Scotland, not nowhere else, right? James Hackett was one of those distillers in Ireland, right, in Cork. and he set up with his family Hackett's Distillery in 1824. So if you pick any distillery going just now in Scotland, right, Glenfiddich got their licence 60 years after Derwent did. Glenmorangie, 20 years after. And two of the oldest ones, Macallan and Glenlivet, got theirs 1 year after. So Australia really they were in there first, right? They were, and it wasn't just like this was commercial. These were like the first licenses, right? So the industry started and grew from over here, right? Now, when Scotland and the UK and all the rest of them, when they were all building up their industry, right, they were exporting a lot of their spirits, right, their whiskies and whatnot, right? But the biggest export market back then was Australia. And when you look at the fact that, okay, we're exporting all there, but oh shit, wait a minute, they've actually got an industry that's thriving, right? Rightly or wrongly, because the environment that we had over here was a bit rough and ready, right? But it was taking away all those export sales. That's the reason why Tasmania shut down their industry, because they couldn't have it. So it was political, right? You can talk about Governor Franklin and his wife and all that, and that was part of it, big, definitely. But the reality was, you're taking away all the sales from the motherland, can't have that, shut it down. And so from 1838, the Anti-Distillation Act came about. Everyone that was still going, not all of them were, but the ones that were still existing were forced to shut down. Hackett said, no, get it up, I'm not doing it. I'm keeping on going. So he fought the Margie Bargy Act till 1839, which was when he was forced to shut it down, and he had to sell all his equipment by November of that year. So the last existing commercial distillery in Tasmania was Hackett's Derwent Distillery. The next one to open was 153 years later, which was built in Lynn when they got the law. Because by that point, that law was so outdated, no one was going to make money. It wasn't a desirable, it wasn't going to work for us, right? And when Bill and Lynn convinced them, obviously they changed the law. But yeah, you're right, actually, that's an outdated law. Here's the deal, right? And so that opened up, thank God it opened up your cabinet behind you. It opened up all these beautiful opportunities, and we've all been spoiled in the last 30 odd years. Do you know what I mean? The fact that, we have someone did go out there, or those original people did go out there and decide, we're going to give it a go. We're going to resurrect this. We're going to make it ours, and it's our stamp, it's our thing, using what we want to do. And, you might have liked it, you might not have liked it. That doesn't mean to say they were right or wrong. It was, they were figuring it out. They were getting all the bench work done, so that guys like myself and people like Emma and all the other third gen distillery, this new kind of wave of distilleries coming out. It's up to us to make that better and create that, difference, and really offer what's never been offered before. Do you know what I mean? And the consumers, the customers, they'll determine whether they like it, whether they think, and that's fine, because no one's going to like everything. So as long as we're putting enough out there to cover everyone, then we're giving it a go, and if people like it, then love it.
What you just raised there, I think, is a really interesting point for, as I've sort of been talking about this kind of third evolution of Tasmanian and Australian whiskey. Oh, we're going in for a second? Oh, good. Okay.
I am, but I was going to go back to my story when we get a chance, because this is actually going to tell the Damien Mackey part and the history part. So I just have to.
Oh, good. That. Okay. Well, I'll make this quick point, because the industry as a whole, it started before COVID, but then COVID gave everybody an inflated sense of confidence because of that rapid change in consumer behavior because of extraordinary circumstance. But what is really interesting about the boom that really started 2016, 2017 is that the producers were able, there was an awful lot of opportunity and a relatively low barrier to entry for producers who were just passionate about making something that they loved to be able to get into the market relatively quickly. And because consumers were fascinated by something that was new and previously unseen, they kind of went along for the ride. But where we are now is that we have to go back to, and I think it's always so fascinating, it doesn't matter if I talk to a bartender or to somebody who's working in brand or to somebody who's a producer, almost always where people start plays a role in where they are now. And so to hear you talk as a producer about the importance of the sales component, that what we make is we can make the most beautiful things in the world, but if nobody buys them, then we haven't completed the loop, that we're not in a there are many businesses where you can make for the sake of making. Some of those are also just hobbies, but you actually have to be able to make the sale. And so understanding what consumers are looking for, understanding the importance of that customer experience. And I think it shines through so many parts of how you speak. And I think the people component is also part of why it's not just the liquid, it's the people that make the liquid that bring certain distilleries to the surface for me. But when you started talking about your products, everything you spoke about was grounded in the people, was grounded in when you open it, you're drinking it with people. And when
Yeah.
you're talking about it, you're talking about it with people. And when you're
Brilliant.
tasting it, you're tasting it with people. And that's such an important piece that you've touched on, right? Which is that it doesn't matter whether the licensing component was all about understanding sales and sales trajectory and understanding that customers and business have to drive industry, and that's not wrong. It's not a crime, but we have to work within it to find the systems and the products and the ways of reaching customers that create those customer entry points, that create those connections, that transcend why do I love this whiskey from the other side of the world where I've never seen the river and I've never seen the mountain,
Yeah, exactly.
but why do I love it? Back to your story.
No, actually, just on that, that's a really good one. So I was very lucky. I don't know how the hell it happened, but I became, so we set up our own, so Bill and Patrick McGuire and all those guys, the earlier distillers in Tassie, the OGs, they set up an association in Tassie called the TWSA. And that was to create an awareness and protection for what it was that we were doing, to legitimise what we were doing and to help grow what was clearly becoming an industry. And the ADA was set up to focus on the more federal side of things as well. And Pat McGuire was the president, Bill was the president, Pat McGuire was the president. And then when I came on board, they were looking for a replacement for Pat. And I was at Redlands at the time, and Bill said to me one day, we sat in a meeting with the management, and they said that you should apply for a position to replace Pat. I was like, what? That's Pat McGuire? What are you talking about? That's the bloody president of an association. I'm the guy that I'm just working. I'm part of the team at Redlands, mate. What are you talking about? So I remember going to the meeting, and we were talking about everything, and then we came to the final thing, and it was like, oh yeah, we need to discuss who's going to be the replacement for Patrick, and I was like, oh, no, and I was sweating. I was like, my hands were all damp and everything. I put my hand up and I went, yeah, Robbie. And I said, well, here's what we're doing at the distillery, and here's where we're going. We've got these plans to go forward, and we've recommended that I put my name forward for the position. And it was just amazing how everyone was like, yes, bloody hell, oh yeah, there we go. And so we went through all the processes, and eventually I got voted in. So I became the president of the association for 4 years. And in that 4 years, I learned everything from scratch, right? I really did, I'm not going to lie. But I learned very quickly. I immersed myself in every aspect, not just of Redlands and what I was doing. I really immersed myself in what the industry was doing and where we were going and where we were taking it, and realising all the different components of the industry and how important it was to work with, the barley producers, the front of house, all the front, the bars, the restaurants, who were literally becoming an extension of our industry. They weren't just like people we sold into. These were the people that were part of what we were doing. Without them, we're only producers, and where we're going to fucking sell it, it's going to store up, it's going to stay in our bond stores until we can try and sell it at a market, which is never going to happen, at that rate. So it was really cool for me to really realise that, okay, here's where we are as an industry. Here's what say we have in terms of what grains can be grown, right? Up to a point, it's only what's available. So it's realising the importance of who we are, where we're going, what we want to achieve, what we will achieve, when we're going to achieve it, and to the point where we got to during that time, we overtook the craft brewing industry in terms of how much barley we were using, and we were able to put a monetary value on that, where we could go to the producers, the growers, the maltsters, and say, by the way, we are up to this point, we've been able to get this right, but here's who we are, here's what we are, and here's what we can contribute. And they're like, shit, you're one of our major customers. We didn't realise that. So all these things really help for me, definitely, to understand not just where my business was at or who I was. It was like, oh no, I'm part of something bigger that's growing, that's now becoming recognised. Granted, it's at home, right? It's within Australia and Tasmania, but for this industry to grow any further, we need to be going into all these other markets that are already established, with the bigger names, the more known ones that that can actually put 18 or 1900 and something on it. Do you know what I mean? Where I can't do that in my distillery. I resurrected a distillery and identity that previously existed, right? But these guys have got the monopoly. These guys have got the distributors. These guys have got the consumers. So what we really needed to focus on is educating. You know, it's like, okay, you know, I'm a mum and dad business. You're a mum and dad business. You're this guy. You're that guy. Whatever. You know, you've got Lark and Carlington, and you've got Sullivan's. You've got Maguire and Co. are going to be a big one as well. But these guys are still minnows in a big sea. Do you know what I mean? Compared to all these other guys, the value that we should all be looking at, and not just from a Tasmanian perspective, but from an Australian perspective, right? Most people don't even know that bloody Tasmania is in Australia. They think it's in bloody Africa, right? The value that we have is in our national brand, or even our states. Do you know what I mean? Where it's not just a case of like, oh, here's my whiskey. I want to put that out to all you guys. It's like, here's my whiskey, which is part of this scene. This scene thrives on this, that, and that, right? This scene has a provenance that started from this and is now built to that, and we're going there. And by taking that to the rest of the world as a collective, as a group, here's all the differences within that group. So by working together, all the little ones with all the bigger ones, by celebrating the fact that we are actually different and can be different, should be different, right? The consumer can then say, right, well, I see value in that brand, the Tasmanian brand, the Australian brand, right? And within that, I like a whiskey that is like this. So that brand there, I like their stuff. So this is what, I saw a lot in. And for me, it was like, okay, well, eventually that's where I'm going to go. I'm not in it for the short term. I'm not in it to, but at the same time, I'm not going to be a big multinational corporation. It's going to be, I'm going to make I want to upscale what I can do to the best of my ability without taking away from the quality aspects of what I consider as part of my production process. So I will upscale at a natural rate that will reflect what you like about my whiskey. Now, hopefully when I'm upscaling to a point where I'm going into the next stage of my evolution, that you'll still go, yep, that's still Robbie and Emma's whiskey. That's what they're producing now is just as good, if not better, hopefully, than what it was when I bought it 2 years ago at that market. When I like these their botrytis casks. And if we all do that, it's bloody exciting. Do you know what I mean? Like, why should it just be Scotland, Ireland, America, and Japan? Let's get Australia on there. Let's get out of the New Zealand. By the way, I have to say, because I'm very lucky. I'm very proud actually that the people who bought Lark, one of them was Troy Trewin, who was a big part of the team who bought New Zealand Whisky Co. And Greg Ramsay is one of them as well. And so in fact, my very first ever public speaking thing was on Australian and New Zealand whiskies. And I was very proud of that. I still am. I got a wee goosebumps, by the way. I know you can't see it on the camera, but I'd literally got goosebumps there. I think what we're doing in our part of the world down here, right, in New Zealand and Australia, is so good and so varied. We should be celebrating that, and we should be working together, because we should be having our own category in world whiskey scene, and world spirit scene, not just in whiskey and gins as well. And so I'm a big fan and a big believer of working together, working with your associations, reaching out to people, helping each other, because if one of us messes up, we all suffer. Right? Especially when you're trying to establish yourself in any field. All it takes, people want people to fail, right? People want to see people doing shit, right? Because they'll focus on the shit things, right? So by working together, we can help each other improve. We can also help each other be that different part of that scene, and get the bloody scene out there. Get people knowing who that scene is. Get people know our region. Get people know what it is that we're all doing here, and let them then decide who they want to. But we should have our own category in the world stage of spirit production. Australia, New Zealand, I think, should be their own. I'm a big fan. That's my opinion, and I think that's valid, by the way.
I don't disagree with you. I think there's a lot of validity in it. I think there's also valuable lessons from the Scotch whisky industry, which is that right now and for a number of decades, the Scotch whisky industry has appeared to the rest of the world to be very united and very consistent in its overall endeavours and aims, but it hasn't always been that way.
No, it's not.
What brought the Scotch whisky industry together was crisis. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity for us in Australasia is to determine how we can work constructively together without needing that crisis to make it happen.
I agree with that. Totally agree with that, because it's true. But I think that we're in a very unique kind of situation, because we've all started from, or restarted in terms of Australia. We've started from small. We all know each other. We all go to venues. We all go to whiskey shows, distillery shows, gin shows. We're all sharing the same floor space. We're all reaching out to the same people. We're all helping each other set up. We're all, we all know each other. We're all part of the scene that we have built, we've established. And so we've already got good grounds to build on that, Granted, you've got, up till recently, say the last 10 years, right? Up until now, we've all seen that growth together naturally. It's only in the last 5 or 10 years or so that we've started seeing external people and funding and takeovers and whatnot, right, for different distilleries that maybe haven't grown up in that environment, but that they still recognise the importance of what they bought into. That market that they're sharing, that's just as important. It should be just as important to them after they bought it, because that's who they're representing. That's who they're part of, who's been represented. So it's important for us all to be seen on the same. We might not have the same. They'll think a corporate structure. A lot of people are mum and dad startup businesses, hobbies. You mentioned that as well. Do you know what I mean? Maybe don't have that experience, but we've got their experience that we can draw upon to help us with what we're doing as well. So I think we've really got it. It's a great opportunity for us to all kind of keep that going, keep that momentum going, and let the people who are coming in also realise that they are part of that, and we kind of need each other, and then that's going to help. Not even in the long run, that's going to establish more reputation, more credibility for them and the companies that they've bought into. You know what I mean? So I'd like to. I'm excited about that. I really want to see more of us.
We're going to have a whole second conversation. We're going to have a whole second conversation, because we haven't even begun to cover why you're one of only, a handful of Tasmanian distilleries that even talk about or think about sustainability in a broad spectrum way. We haven't even gone to the gin. There's so much more to talk about, but I think we've also covered so much ground in this episode that I kind of want to let this one stand alone and do some work, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But before we bring it into land, or maybe as we bring it into land, can we bring it back I'd love to bring it back just to the spirit itself for a second. Patrick Maguire, legendary in the Tasmanian whisky scene. Part of the reason why I think its third evolution now is because, it wouldn't surprise me if in years to come, Pat gets likened to Billy Walker of infamy, somebody who has moved through a number of different distilleries, adding something new each time and continuing to elevate his practice as a producer. And so I think, his new distillery is absolutely going to be one to watch. But within that, part of what excites me about where Tasmanian whisky is at right now is this very distinct, and you spoke about it, the very distinct, multifaceted nature of distilleries that, previously. And I've been to some of those chats, and been to Old Kempton and been to Lorraine, and have heard some of the conversations where, it is verbatim. Well, Bill told me that he was doing this and this, and so that's what we did. Or even at Overeem, where they still use the same piece of hygiene toweling and terry cloth because that's what Casey always did. So you just do the thing that Casey always did. And there are so many components of that, what is now old world, traditional Tasmanian whiskey. But we also then have these really unique characteristics. The integration of oat into some of what Damien is doing at Hunter Island.
Yeah, man.
I could talk yeast and fermentation with Rob all day long at Warbs. And then there are there are a number of other really spectacular little pockets that I think that stand out because each is so unique. So I'd love to hear your painting a picture of what your spirit character is. What is the character of Derwent Distillery? Maybe it's shape if we go all the way back. Maybe it's shape, maybe it's mouthfeel, maybe it's texture, but you really define Botrytis cask for me.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to define the Derwent Distillery spirit character for me as well.
I look at, there's always a signature, right? So there's always something identifying character, quality, mouthfeel, something that always you can blind taste and go, oh, that reminds me of such and such, or oh, that's definitely this, right? For me, it's the mouthfeel, right? For me, it's like my still, I chose my still deliberately, right? My still is electric powered, almost like if you took a Lark or an Overeem or a Hunter Island still, right, which is more like squatter and chubbier. If you took that and elongated it, so taking it from a Danny DeVito to a El McPherson, right, that's my still, right? And my heating elements aren't external, my heating elements are internal. So at the very bottom of the still is where all my heating elements are. So because I now have this extra height, that I need to allow my vapour to escape and create, and keep going, I'm able to create a spirit that goes from anywhere from, a refined, elegant, fruity, floral, Glenmorangie kind of idea, not flavour, but like that kind of more copper contact, more reflux, more refined spirit kind of character. I can do that, or I can go hard and really create a rich, viscous, oily, big, unapologetic whiskey if I wanted to as well. But I can fluctuate in between. So the way I look at it is currently I've got 2 core releases and I'll have a third release that I'll vary or swap between, right? The idea that I want people to have is not so much flavour, because flavour will always change, right? It's more in the consistency of there's thought behind that. There's a it's not leaving me wanting, right? It gets you thinking about it, it gets you talking about it, it gets you engaging, right? That's what I'm drinking a whiskey just now. There's no one else in the room with me, right? But I'm with you, and I'm with whoever's talking, whoever's watching just now as well. So I am actually drinking with all you guys, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't be drinking this. I'd have a cup of tea, to be honest, or I'd have a pint or I'd have a can of Tennent's or something, right? That's what I'd be drinking just now. When I'm with people, when I'm in a sharing environment, when I'm telling stories or hearing stories or, conversing with someone, this is my choice of drink, right? And so for me, it's something that I want to be able to open up the bottle and just enjoy what it's given me in terms of nose. It makes me think about at least what I'm tasting, whether if I like it, do I like it, do I not like it, what is it I like, what is it I don't like. At least I'm getting you engaging. At least I'm getting you think about it. It's a very interactive, very sociable drink is what I look at as whiskey. And you can't make the same whiskey won't taste the same to any one person, on different days. Some days, every day people ask me, what's your favourite? What's your best one? What's your best ever? What's the best ever? And I'm like, fuck me. Honestly, mate, it's literally today's Tuesday and it's in July or whatever. Whereas yesterday it was Monday and it was that whiskey. today it's all about this one. For me, the Botrytis I'm very proud of because I've made a flavour profile that no one else was making, which is, I feel, has the benefit of having this beautiful mouthfeel that keeps it going. And fortunately, it's been good enough that people appreciate either the flavour or both the flavour, how it sits with them, and the fact that they can drink it again. And that's, to me, that's, I'm not making whiskey for somebody that can pick out individual things and say that gives me that gives me that. I'm picking a whiskey that I don't care if you're male, female, or anything. I don't care if you're of a certain age, if you're younger, if you're older. I want to make whiskies that get people together. I want to get whiskies that make people go, I like that because of, or you like that because of that. Oh, I didn't see it that way, but I get where you're coming from. And it just, I just appreciate that it's the quality for me goes into how I make it. The perception of that quality comes from who's drinking it. I'm looking forward to it. Tas Whisky Week is, like, for me, it's one of the highlights of the year. And it's great because it's once a year and you get to see people that you haven't seen since the previous one. And it's great to catch up, and it's always over a dram or 2 or 5. And it's great, and it's like catching up with everyone like yourself and so many more people. And it's a great thing that it's a good example, a great example of something that we've set up from scratch as an industry together, that reaches out to not just other industry people, but to our consumers, and not just from Tasmania, but from all over Australia and even some other parts in the world. So for me, I'm very proud of Tas Whisky Week. We actually started that when I was the president. Not that it was my idea, I'm not claiming that, but it was just so nice to be a hands-on part of something that might become something, and we can grow this. And each year it did, and it has done, and to the point where we're now at our 10th year. And we're like, my God, this is like amazing. It's become a fixture in a lot of people's diaries and calendars. And it's like, yes. And every year we all see a growth in numbers, in terms of like bottles that we're selling, or, interest that's been generated. And the same people might come down, but they'll bring a friend this time, or they'll bring another family member. And you can just see that it's growing, and the venues that will host the events in are growing as well. So that's really exciting. It's really cool.
I think it's probably the very best way to meet the Tasmanian whiskey scene, in one moment. I think it's a remarkable festival. So very much looking forward to being back across the Tasman, very much looking forward to catching up over a dram or two. Robbie, you've been spectacular. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tash. Cheers.
So, have you tried a Derwent Distillery Botrytis cask or any of their other selections? Do you have a favourite Tasmanian whiskey? I'd love to know who else you'd like to hear from, as these behind-the-scenes conversations with distillers unpack so much more than just whiskey making, but culture itself and the connections that bring us as whiskey lovers together. I'm Tash from More Good Drinks. You can, of course, subscribe, like, rate, review, give a little thumbs up, share it with your pals, and why not pour a dram and join me for the next episode of More Good Drinks, coming your way very soon.